If you're looking for a jungler who can farm fast, take down towers unnoticed, and dominate enemies in 1v1 fights, then Sun is one of the best choices you can make. This hero is one of the most annoying fighters when played correctly, and while many see him as just a split pusher, the truth is that in the jungle, he can be an absolute nightmare for the enemy team. Sun isn't a conventional jungler like Ling, Fanny, or Karina, but what makes him special is his ability to pressure the map without always needing to be in team fights. While the enemies are distracted, Sun can take down towers, farm efficiently, and force the enemy team to split up just to deal with him. If you play him right, you'll make the enemy choose between two bad options: ignore you and lose objectives, or chase you and leave their team at a disadvantage elsewhere. But don't get it wrong, playing Sun in the jungle doesn't mean just splitting all game and ignoring your team. Knowing when to join fights, when to take objectives, and how to rotate properly is what separates a good Sun player from someone who just runs around the map without being useful. In this video, I'll explain step by step how to play Sun effectively in the jungle. We'll go over his early game rotations, how to use his clones to confuse enemies, what to do in team fights, and how to lead your team to victory by applying constant map pressure. So stay until the end, because here, you'll learn how to master Sun like a true pro. If your teammates are pressuring a lane, and the enemy is overextended, this is the perfect time to gank. Sun excels at diving under turrets because his clones can tank shots, giving your team an advantage in early skirmishes. When ganking, always approach from the side or through the jungle to avoid vision. Before engaging, use Skill 1, Endless Variety, to send a clone forward. This will confuse the enemy and make them hesitate, giving you a chance to get closer without taking unnecessary damage. Once you're in range, activate ultimate clone techniques to summon multiple clones and immediately auto-attack the enemy. If they start running, use Skill 2, Swift Exchange, to switch positions with your clone and cut off their escape. A well-timed gank can completely change the flow of the game. Sun is excellent at chasing enemies down, especially if they don't have mobility skills. Your goal in early fights is to force the enemy to either burn their flicker or get taken down. Even if they manage to escape, making them use their escape spells means they will be vulnerable the next time you gank. Always communicate with your teammates. If your allies have crowd control like a stun or slow, wait for them to land it before fully committing to a fight. If no lanes are in a good position for a gank, continue farming efficiently. Sun scales very well with gold, so the faster you clear camps and gain items, the stronger you'll be for mid-game fights. Always prioritize jungle objectives like the turtle when it spawns. Sun's clones deal extra damage, which makes him one of the fastest turtle takers in the game. If the enemy jungler is on the opposite side of the map, take the turtle immediately to secure a team-wide gold and experience boost. However, always check your mini-map before committing. If multiple enemies are missing, they might be preparing to contest it. When contesting objectives, positioning is key. Sun should not be the first one to engage in a fight unless he is ahead in gold and levels. Instead, try to enter from an angle where the enemy backline doesn't immediately target you. If the fight is in your favor, use ultimate clone techniques to disrupt the enemy formation and apply pressure on their squishy heroes. If the fight is looking bad, retreat and continue farming. Sun needs gold, and unnecessary deaths slow down his power spike. When moving around the jungle, make sure to use the bushes to stay hidden. Sun is not an assassin, but he can still surprise enemies if they don't see him coming. If you spot the enemy jungler, don't immediately engage unless you're ahead. Sun does well in extended fights, but he can struggle against burst damage early on. Instead, steal jungle camps whenever possible, especially the enemy's purple buff if their hero relies on mana. At this stage, you should also start thinking about invading the enemy jungle. If you win an early fight or force the enemy jungler to retreat, take advantage of it by stealing their camps. Even if you don't secure the kill, denying the enemy jungler farm puts them behind. Sun's ability to take down jungle camps quickly makes him a strong counter jungler, but you should always be aware of enemy rotations. If their mid laner or roamer is missing, they might be coming to help their jungler. By the time the first turtle fight is over, you should already have a decent amount of gold and be close to your first core item.
Godlike. Killing spree. Double kill. Launch attack. Understood.
Now it's time to transition into the mid-game, where Sun's real power starts to shine. At this point, your focus should shift towards split pushing, taking objectives and forcing enemies into bad fights where Sun's clones can deal massive sustained damage. Sun's mid-game is where he truly starts to shine. At this stage, your focus should be on creating pressure across the map, whether through split pushing, forcing enemies to react to you, or taking down key objectives like the Lord. Sun is one of the best split pushers in the game because his clones can deal massive damage to turrets, making him a nightmare for the enemy team if left unchecked. Whenever you see an opportunity, rotate to side lane and start pushing. The key to effective split pushing is map awareness. Always check the mini-map before committing. If you see multiple enemies on the opposite side of the map, that's your cue to push aggressively. Use Skill 1 Endless Variety to summon a clone and tank turret shots while you attack. Sun's clones can absorb a lot of damage, letting you take down towers much faster than most heroes. However, you don't want to overextend without information on enemy positions. If you're pushing and suddenly all enemies go missing, there's a good chance they're rotating to stop you. In this case, back off immediately and wait for them to reveal themselves on the map. Sun is strong in 1v1 fights, but if multiple enemies collapse on you, it can be hard to escape. Always have a plan if you suspect enemies are coming. Position yourself near a bush so you can hide and recall safely. Aside from split pushing, you should keep an eye on jungle objectives, especially the Lord. Sun excels at taking down Lord quickly because his clones deal full damage to it. If your team secures an advantage in a fight, go straight for Lord to give your team a massive advantage. However, never start Lord alone unless you are absolutely sure the enemy jungler is far away. Sun can take Lord quickly, but he can also be easily interrupted if the enemy team contests it. When it comes to team fights, Sun's role can vary depending on the situation. If your team is ahead, you can dive the backline and pressure enemy marksmen or mages, forcing them out of position. However, if your team is behind, it's usually better to wait for the enemy to engage first before jumping in. Sun works best when fights are already chaotic. His clones make it hard for enemies to focus on a single target, allowing him to deal massive damage while the enemy is distracted. A key strategy in fights is to position your clones strategically. Don't just activate your ultimate and run in. Try to summon clones from different angles to create confusion. If you see an enemy trying to escape, use Skill 2, Swift Exchange, to swap places with a clone and cut off their retreat. This makes Sun a great finisher. Once he gets on top of an enemy, it's almost impossible for them to get away without using flicker or a mobility skill. Another important tactic is baiting out enemy skills. Sun's clones can absorb skill shots, so if you see an enemy about to use a big ability, summon a clone to tank the damage. This is especially useful against heroes with single target crowd control, like Cho, Franco, or Kaya. If they waste their abilities on a clone, you'll have a huge advantage in the fight. If you get caught in a bad fight, don't panic. Sun can escape if used correctly. Use Skill 1 Endless Variety to send a clone in one direction while you run in another. It might trick the enemy into chasing the wrong target. If you still have Skill 2 Swift Exchange, use it to jump to safety. However, keep in mind that Sun doesn't have the best escape options, so positioning is key. Avoid fighting in bad spots where you can easily get surrounded. At this point in the game, you should also be looking at item power spikes. If you've been farming well, you should have at least 2 or 3 core items, making you a huge threat in any fight. But remember, gold doesn't win games, objectives do. Your goal is to take down towers, secure Lord, and force the enemy into uncomfortable fights where Sun's clones can overwhelm them. The best Sun players are the ones who control the tempo of the game. Whether through split pushing, objective control, or team fighting, you should always be applying pressure and forcing the enemy team to react. By now, the game should be entering the late stage, where one mistake can decide everything. If you've played correctly up to this point, you should be in a strong position to carry your team to victory. By the late game, every decision matters, and one mistake can cost your team the game. At this stage, Sun becomes a serious threat in fights, but also a high-priority target for the enemy team. Your job now is to balance split pushing with team fights, knowing when to apply pressure on the lanes and when to group up with your team. If your team is ahead, the safest option is to push together and secure objectives. Stick with your team and use your clones to pressure turrets while protecting your back line. However, if the game is close or your team is slightly behind, Sun's split-pushing power can turn the tide. Look for moments when the enemy team is distracted or grouped on one side of the map, and then push the opposite lane. The key to split-pushing in the late game is timing. If you push too early, the enemy can clear the wave and regroup. If you push too late, the enemy might already be sieging your base. Watch the mini-map constantly. If the enemy team is fighting near Lord, push aggressively to force someone to defend. If you see 2 or 3 enemies coming for you, don't take the risk, back off and rotate. But if they send only one hero, especially a squishy one, you can look for the kill and then keep pushing. When it comes to team fights, Sun is not a frontline tank. You don't want to be the first one diving in. Instead, wait for the enemy to engage, then jump onto their backline when they are distracted. Target the enemy marksman or mage, as they are usually the most vulnerable and crucial damage dealers. If you manage to take them out, your team will have a much higher chance of winning the fight. A great way to initiate fights with Sun is by using Skill 1, Endless Variety, to send a clone forward, making the enemy think you're committing. If they use abilities on the clone, you have an opening to go in. Once you engage, immediately activate Skill 3, Clone Techniques, to maximize your damage output and create chaos. If the enemy has heavy crowd control, wait for them to use their key abilities before fully committing. Another strong strategy in fights is to position yourself in a flanking angle. Instead of diving straight into the fight, try to come in from the side or the back, making it harder for enemies to react. Sun's clones will confuse the enemy team, and by the time they realize which one is the real Sun, it's often too late. Remember, patience and map awareness are key. Know when to fight, when to push, and when to back off. If you found this guide helpful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Mobile Legends tips and strategies. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if you want a guide on another hero. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.